viewers in, and then
Absolutely.
sent it around to a bunch of my group chats so we'll
Yep.
get some people tuned in. But yeah, bro, big big game yesterday for the Warriors. I was uh surprised
Good.
they lost that game, honestly.
Good time to kind of talk about the Warriors in all honesty, because they've been fun. They've been fun for once, for the first time in a while. Something I'm sure we'll talk about. But yeah, it's been nice, man. It's you know how it gets kind of sometimes writing about these teams, and I've been doing it for so long, man. It's like kind of same story, different day with them for a while over these last 2 years, and it's been nice kind of just injecting a little juice for the first time, you know.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? Because at the deadline there was so much talk about, are the Dubs going to do anything? All the Warrior fans were like just like waiting. All right, do something.
Mm.
KD obviously, and then the Jimmy Butler saga. Just like, all right, they're interested. He doesn't want to go there. And then all of a sudden, you get Jimmy, and now you're what 15-3 since the trade.
And in all honesty, I was probably one of the few. I mean, I don't know if it was one of the few, but at least in my head, let alone writing, but like to my dad and my homies, the people I talk ball with, like I was like, I don't know, man. I don't see the Butler fit. Like it feels so funky, you know?
Uh,
And then to see it on the court, it's like, damn, it looks amazing. You know, like this team might, I don't know, make a little run here. I don't know about a title, but I mean they're gonna be competitive, which is a lot better than what they were.
the thing with Jimmy, man, is like we know, like Steve Kerr was talking about it today. I was listening to, I think it was 95.7. He was on maybe like an hour ago, and he was like, Jimmy's an alpha, right, in terms of his personality and his demeanor and everything, but we know he's not a selfish player when he's
Mm.
on the court. He could play 44 minutes, take 6 shots, and he doesn't care as long as they don't lose. And
And
that's what.
in those 45 minutes, he might be like the most winning player on the court in terms of like how to win a basketball game, being in the right spot. Playing alongside Steph is like a skill in its own, and he seemed to have pick it up maybe outside of Kevin Durant the quickest out of any of these guys he's played alongside, you know.
Mhm. What do you think about, like, people have been saying, if had you guys traded for KD instead, or had the Warriors traded for KD instead of Jimmy, would they still be in this same position right now or not?
I mean, I think that's kind of silly because we saw this team like be maybe the most dominant team of the recent era, and essentially 3 years, 2 years they won the title. 3 years you're Kevin Durant injury away from becoming, a three-time champion with that same team. So I think that'd be silly. I mean, obviously Katie's a little bit of a different guy than when he played here, but I think they'd pick that up pretty quickly. I don't think he's that different of a guy.
I think it's also not a knock as much on KD as it should be. That team the Warriors had during that era was also different, right? You're talking about
Mm.
Steph in his prime, KD in his prime, Clay in his prime, Draymond in his prime, Iguodala there, right? So they wouldn't be to that level, but I think it's also, well, I think we can all agree that Kevin Durant is a better player than Jimmy Butler, right? I think it's pretty unanimous across the
Yeah.
board. There's things that Jimmy does that just KD doesn't do when it comes to the defensive side of the ball. Him, like you just said, not needing, you could play 45 minutes to be the most effective player on the court and not score more than 10 points, right? But
Mm.
you might grab 7 or 8 boards, might dish out 6 or 7 assists, but then there's also things that don't show up in the box score, right? Like you mentioned, being on the right place at the right time on the defensive side, calling out the screens for guys, all those sort of things, right? So who knows? I mean, KD, the more talented player for sure, but the impact that Jimmy Butler's had on this team, it's kind of hard to say one way or the other whether or not KD would have had the same impact or not.
Kevin Durant and Jimmy Butler, they both kind of represent, I think, something the Warriors just haven't had. Even with, this isn't a slight on Steph, this isn't a slight on Draymond, because I think both of those guys kind of possess this skill. But Sandeep, you watch a lot of basketball. There is something about being a closer, and this team for the last 2 years now, it's just been like fumble after fumble. You're up 20, you're up 18, you're up 15, you're up double figures late in the game. A game that we've seen the Warriors, the Golden State Warriors, this championship brand of basketball win time and time again. Well, over the last 2 years, they've gotten really comfortable losing those games. There's been a couple of them since Jimmy Butler's been in town that it seemed to and feel to look that way. You want to talk about when they played the Bucks just recently? The Bucks cut that lead down to 3 points in the fourth quarter. And it felt, here we go again. Obviously, you're missing Steph Curry, so a little bit of a different story. But Jimmy Butler does what he does. He takes that weight and that pressure that guys like, they've potentially needed to step up, like a Moses Moody, like a Brandon Podziemski. Jimmy Butler has seemed to absorb all that pressure of a closer in 18 games that the Warriors have not necessarily had for 2 years. And it's freed up guys like Steph. I know Steph recently, he missed a game. He's been tired. But prior to that, he's been playing the best basketball he's played in, a 2-year span. That's because the other team isn't sending 4 guys at him to stop them. They're going to trade buckets. We're going to give you Draymond Green buckets. We're going to give you Kevon Looney buckets at the rim because we're going to try to stop Steph Curry. Well, now they can't necessarily do that. And it seemed to kind of open this offense up as a whole, where it seems like Brandon Podziemski is so much more comfortable out there on the court. Moses Moody, so much more comfortable. And I know there's a lot of people out there that are kind of clamoring for him to get more minutes and everything. And I agree. He's really stepped up as a player, but it seems like, as simple as it is, and we throw this term around, but like Jimmy Butler was kind of that missing puzzle piece. And I think what he's done late in games specifically is what has made this team suddenly look like, a team that might fizzle out in the first round, let alone not even make the playoffs, to now you're going, they're going to be a tough out, whoever they play, type of thing. And you could not say this about this team 3 months ago, a month ago, definitely not a year ago, not dating back to the championship roster they had, in 2022. It's really seemed to kind of turn a page, and they're just different. They're just different with Jimmy Butler out there.
Yeah, the thing with Jimmy too is he's made a lot of those guys around him better. You just touched on a couple of them, right? Brandon Podziemski's been playing really, really well ever since the acquisition of Jimmy Butler. His numbers are up, I think, across the board. And Moses Moody, his 3 balls improved a lot. He's always been a pretty solid defender, but you see him just more comfortable out there alongside the guys. GP2 has been playing really well the last couple of weeks. I think Jimmy just has relieved a lot of the pressure off of some of these younger guys, right? That who are kind of, it's tough when you're in a position where you're on a team that's so used to winning and still has championship aspirations, right? But you're expected to play every single night on a consistent level alongside Steph and Draymond, who have high expectations. But now you bring in a guy like Jimmy who can carry that load, and he's very uplifting toward the guys. He empowers them. You see him talking to the young guys since day one with being with the Warriors, right? He's not a guy that needs to take time to get comfortable in asserting himself. He does it right away, and guys have responded to it. And that's why the Warriors are where they are right now, 15-3 with him in the lineup, and let's talk about the game last night, because, Steph Curry obviously being out was the headline. And on the Nuggets side, no Jokic, no Jamal Murray. So you're thinking, okay, sure, a lot of us are thinking, or a couple nights ago, that game, right? It should have been an easy dub for the Dubs, but obviously they ended up dropping that game and it being one of those kind of trap games. And Steve Kerr was talking about it today also, that every team has these kind of moments during the season, right, where maybe you're on a stretch and you face a team that just, even when you think maybe you should get a win, it doesn't happen. I mean, the Nuggets the day before that lost to the Wizards, courtesy of Jordan Poole on a 35-footer, a few seconds before the buzzer. But the Warriors came out and responded on Tuesday night with a big win over Milwaukee. And Steph, Steph being out, I think he needed the rest. They talked about his back issues. Do you think there's cause for concern there? Because Steph said he's been dealing with the pain for maybe about a week or so now. And a lower back issue, especially at the age that Steph is at, 37, is something you got to be careful with. So you think there's major concern here or just minor concern?
I think it's minor. I mean, it seems like, I think Steve Kerr, deserves a little bit of credit, because we question around the NBA a lot when these guys get rest days, right? I think Steve Kerr was as transparent as possible last night at Chase Center, talking about kind of Steph shouldering such a load, needing a rest day, needing a day off, needing kind of like, I think he kind of equated it at one point to like a mental health day, it's funny because it's like, couldn't we all use one of those from time to time, And we don't hold guys like Steph Curry to those types of standards, right? You should be out there every single night. And prior, I don't think many Warriors fans, when they saw the start of the season, and even when you acquired Jimmy Butler, it felt like it was going to take near perfection for the Warriors to be in the mix for the 6th seed. You're going to need some things to happen, and you're going to also need to play really good basketball. So to even kind of envision a night where you can give Steph Curry a night off in the stretch run of the season, what there's like 12 games left, the fact that he can take a night and you can kind of still secure a win against a good team. I know the Bucks are struggling currently, but that is a good team by every standards with one of the best players on the world. And they can go out there, not alone, keep it competitive, but go out there and win. It's such a different element of what this team has kind of been able to provide. And the fact that you can give Steph that, I think really kind of maybe pushes more confidence into who he is as a player, because it's like, we were able to give you a night off. Now you kind of owe us a big night when you're back, right? Because there's no situation we thought of where we could ever give you a night off, because we needed Steph Curry to be an absolute superstar to even be in contention for the play-in tournament. Now we can give you a night off and still be in the 6th seed race. I mean, it feels like, two different worlds of what Warriors basketball has been. And so the fact that they can give him that, I feel like feels really good, and is kind of a sign that this maybe isn't that serious, the way Steve talked about it. And I think also there's just a little bit of fire around this team that they haven't had. And you could see it, I think, with Draymond Green last night, who was fantastic. I mean, maybe one of his best game in years. I know we're just coming off of it, but it really felt like such an amazing Draymond Green performance. He seemed incredibly fired up. Jimmy Butler has brought that. And I don't think Steph Curry wants to miss out on this. He's talked so much over the past year or so about like getting older, wanting to win a 5th ring, how important that is to him. I think we've seen how bad it's been. Steph Curry's looked that in the eye with what this franchise has put around him and how little of help it's been. He's seen what that looks like. Now you're, kind of in front of a guy like Jimmy Butler playing next to him. Like, hey, let's make the most of this. And even if we are a little bit banged up, who's not at this point in the season? And they're just kind of capitalizing. I mean, it feels, it feels, Sandeep, just like a little bit of a breath of fresh air. I've covered this team for, I think this is my 5th season, and dating back to when we were interns, we were talking about Golden State Warriors basketball. And at that point, it was
the good old
exciting.
days.
Yeah, it was exciting. It was fun. The games were fun to watch. And I think, not taking anything away from Steph Curry, because he's always, he's the best show in sports, in my opinion. But this team felt stale, and the fact that Jimmy Butler's out there, and it's exciting to flip on the TV. It's exciting to step into the arena and kind of understand what you're going to get from night to night with this team now. And I just think that alone has kind of really brought some juice to this team from top to bottom, from Steve to Steph, to Draymond, to Jimmy Butler, to newcomers. We mentioned some guys that have really stepped up and kind of looked better. I would be kind of remiss if I didn't mention Quentin Post, who's
I was just about to say, man,
incredibly valuable minutes.
Player.
Yeah, just really valuable minutes. And like, you see him kind of start to make some plays defensively and like get boards, and something that I mean, even if I thought the best of Quentin Post, and this is a guy who you watched after the draft and trying to watch all the highlights and see what he did at Boston College, it's like, I never really thought he would be this version of a player, like a true stretch 5, which is something I think Warriors fans have been begging for years, or you're
like
pounding you're pounding the table for Nikola Vucevic, who, I mean, nothing against him, but Quentin Post is like bringing minutes similar to that, not on the same level, but I mean, he is bringing an element to this team they just haven't had, and he's fun too. I mean, he's out there barking and yelling and matching energy with Draymond.
Quentin Post is basically a younger, more mobile, just inexperienced Nikola Vucevic.
Yeah, it really is, and who knows what this guy could be in years. And we've seen some centers kind of come and fizzle. And a guy like Trace Jackson Davis, who, a year ago, I'm probably talking to you and going, this guy's a big part of the future. And now he's getting DNPs night in and night out, so you never know. But I mean, Quentin Post is absolutely making the most of this moment. And, if the playoffs were tomorrow, he'd be in the rotation, which is something that feels crazy to say because he's been that good. It's not like it's a bad thing where you're out of options. He's been that good to deserving of those minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. And Post has definitely been, I think, one of the surprises of the season for this team, right? And like you mentioned, TJD last year, you're thinking, all right, this guy's going to have a big role, played
Mhm.
really well as a rookie. And then this year has just kind of his ups and downs. They start leaning on Looney more small ball with Draymond at the 5. But then here comes this 6'10" rookie who can just stroke it from
From the
outside. Like you said,
Netherlands, from
you know,
Amsterdam.
the
Yeah.
first time they've had a stretch big. I mean, I've been watching Warriors basketball, I think, since 2007. And, you think about where this team was then, Andres Biedron's their center, and then just David Lee, small ball guy, when they play with him at center.
Yeah.
You saw the guy, obviously Andrew Bogut, and then to Looney and, David West and all these guys we can name. But now you have a guy who can space the floor and complements just what this team needs, especially when you factor in a guy like a Jimmy who likes to play inside and post up and attack the basket. It gives you versatility with lineups. We have a question from one of the viewers here. How do you feel about Kuminga and his fit on this roster? We've seen him back for a couple of games now. Last night, struggled with his shooting. The Denver game, he had a period, I think, in the third quarter where he had like about 8 points in a row or so. But what do you see? I mean, ups and downs. How do you see him kind of fitting as it goes forward?
It's looked a little clunky. I mean, it's been 3 games. The first game, I would have been like, man, he fit right back in. He picked right back up. He's getting rebounds, getting assists. He looked very good. And then, kind of a stinker last night against the Bucks. The Warriors, you think Steve Kerr and Draymond Green and Jimmy Butler and Steph Curry, whatever decision makers you want to call it, you need to make it work. I mean, and I feel like it's a big if from where we're sitting right now, regardless of how good they've been. If you want to be a championship contender, if you want to win 2 playoff series and really get in the mix, Jonathan Kuminga has to be a significant part of that. If you look around the NBA, kind of like this championship formula where we talk about the Celtics, where you have Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum who lead the way, but you have a lot of like athletic, physical wings that can get downhill and get a bucket. And then you have your guys that can bounce outside and knock down a big shot. Well, the Warriors may have found that with a Moses Moody, but who's that attacking wing that's going to provide real kind of a spark off the bench or even in the starting lineup that's going to get you 15 points in a playoff series in a game where you need it? It seems like it has to be Jonathan Kuminga. You need him to be that guy. And I think he himself, who wants a big payday, whether that be from the Warriors or somewhere else around the NBA, he needs to do that, right? I mean, it's on him. He's coming to that doorstep here. And
yeah, it's a contract year for him.
I mean, he's a very talented guy. We've seen this guy. I mean, it's such a bummer. He obviously got injured, but I mean, the week prior to his injuries, back-to-back games with 34 points, really kind of providing a spark for this team, kind of being, I think the big question mark, at least I had going into the season is who's the second best player in the Golden State Warriors? Draymond Green's obviously had a fantastic season, but I guess maybe offensively is the question. And I think Jonathan Kuminga kind of answered that with the run he had prior to his injury. And I think it's going to take a little bit of time, but almost having Jimmy Butler be the starter, be the guy that's going to take those big minutes early on, and he can kind of step away and play alongside Steph in the second unit. It's almost like a layup for him, in my opinion, because it's like that role right there is so incredibly valuable. And the Warriors haven't had a guy who could do it, even, when they were kind of making a run for the play-in over the last 2 years or whatever it was. They didn't have a guy that would do that. You wanted Moses Moody to be that guy. You wanted one of these guys to step up off the bench, but you needed Jonathan Kuminga to be in the starting lineup and be a real threat there, where now his role can kind of shrink a little bit. And what he provides, and I'm not saying in terms of minutes or anything, but if he can provide just strictly offensively, getting to the rim, being athletic, regardless of the addition of Jimmy Butler, this team's not athletic. And you look around the NBA, athleticism is just bursted as in terms of importance. When you're talking about draft picks, we're talking about I want athleticism on my team. If I'm building a team that's going to
especially on the wing.
Exactly. And the Warriors just don't really have that overall. They are a veteran team. They're a little bit older. Well, Jonathan Kuminga provides that in tenfold. I mean, he's the most athletic guy on the court, almost any court he steps on. He's got that type of juice. And I think if he kind of really, continues to just explore that role as threatening the rim and kind of pushing the ball downhill, he could be a real dude if this team gets into the real playoff mix, outside the first round. But I mean, I'm talking here, and as I'm saying it to you, Sandeep, it's a lot of ifs, it's a lot of buts and ifs and hopes type of thing. We're gonna have to see it. And unfortunately for Kuminga, he's got kind of 12 games for guys like you and I to figure that out, I guess.
So you're saying the come bucket needs to just come in and get buckets?
He does. I hope so. I'd hope so.
No, but it's true, man. Him coming off the bench is, I feel like, an ideal scenario now, because you can come in and just, when Steph's on the bench, even if Jimmy's still out there, he's going to have a little bit more freedom to play maybe some one-on-one ball and exploit mismatches that he gets on defense. Whereas versus when Steph is on the court, we know the offense, the ball runs through Steph, right? It's a lot of motion, Steph running off screens, and Kuminga just kind of plays off him there. But when Steph's on the bench, he gets the ball in his hands more one-on-one looks. And again, we talked about, him playing alongside guys like a Quentin Post too, or a Buddy Hield who comes in spacing, right? And it leaves the paint open when you surround a guy like Kuminga with shooters. Buddy, point. We know Buddy, right? Streaky shooter. He can give you 5 threes a game. He can go 0 for 7, so it's kind of just, if he gives you a couple, you feel good. Like, all right, at least he knocked in a few. But the way Kuminga plays, like you mentioned, he attacks the rim. He wants to get into the paint. He likes to post up, whether he's facing up, back to the basket. And it just gives you a different dynamic from what we're used to seeing from this team. This team is a good 3-point shooting team. We know about Steph, obviously, but Post can knock it down. Moody can knock him down. GP2, when he's open in that corner, can hit, can hit him too. And obviously Buddy Hield, but Kuminga gives you something that this team needs. A guy who's aggressive, and obviously Jimmy is that guy too, but he's in the starting lineup. But if, like you said, these next 12 games is going to be really important for Kuminga getting back into that groove, as the playoffs approach. But, I want to talk about Draymond Green a little bit too, because you mentioned last night, really big game, and the conversation, he was asked if he feels like he has a chance to win DPOY, and Jimmy Butler was asked about this too. So I want to play a quick little soundbite. Here's Jimmy talking about Draymond and just his defensive presence on the court.
Hell yeah. I think you got to respect the hell out of what he does. And it's so hard to do, to shoot the ball, I don't know, 4 times maybe, if that, and then just lock in on defense every single possession down and get mad when anybody scores, not just the guy that he's guarding. You don't find that around the league too often. And, he's won at this level. He is a Hall of Famer for a reason. I just respect what he brings to this squad, what he brings to this locker room, and how he affects winning in every single way. And when it's his night to score, he scores. But every single night, he's going to guard somebody.
Yeah, so there's Jimmy Butler talking about Draymond and just how much he respects and appreciates what Draymond does on the court. And look, truth be told, there's not many guys like Draymond, if any at all. You can make the case that Draymond is one of one in the NBA in terms of the way he plays and what he brings on the court. And I really liked what Draymond said when he was asked about, the DPOY award, because he said that these voters, oftentimes they just look at the numbers. They just see how many steals a guy is averaging, how many blocks a guy is averaging, defensive rating. And don't get me wrong, those are very important things, but you truly have to watch a guy play multiple times throughout the season to make the case for who is the best defensive player in the NBA, or is capable of winning, being on the all defensive teams, because not everything reflects in the stats when it comes to defense, right? It's not like offense where you can see Jokic is averaging a triple-double or SGA is averaging 33 points tonight and, whatever it is. But you look at a guy like Draymond, he's the linebacker of that defense, right? He's the Fred Warner. He's calling out screens for every single person. Now he's calling out teams' plays before they even run them. He knows where everyone needs to be on the court, whether it's the offense, the defense, and him coming over to alter a shot or to just get in a passing lane, like things like that don't reflect in a box score, and he said how Wemby pretty much had the award on lock up until he was hurt, which my opinion was, I thought it was kind of BS that just because Wemby's averaging 3.5 blocks a game, it's like, all right, let's give him DPOY, because again, it's not just about stats. Rudy Gobert won 3 or 4 Defensive Player of the Year awards in this league, which is absurd to me still, because I think Draymond should have at least 2 right now. There was one year where Kawhi Leonard won one, and I think he missed about 20 games that season.
Yeah.
I thought Draymond should have won that year. Anthony Davis, it's crazy to me that he doesn't have at least one in his bag right now, because he's the guy that guards 1 through 5. And again, just it doesn't reflect on the stats all the time. So what did you think about what Draymond said? I mean, does he have a legitimate chance here to win?
Yeah.
Guys like Evan Mobley are obviously in the mix. Dyson Daniels having a really good season for the Hawks too, but wouldn't surprise me if Draymond's a finalist, because I do think that highly of him on the defensive side of the ball.
Absolutely. I mean, I've been kind of, Draymond Green, especially as the Warriors have, declined, has had his ups and downs, and teams have, the fans, I think as a whole, have had rightful questions about him. I think he's still just even during those times, brought it defensively for the most part. But now there seems to be a switch has hit. And even when they started the season early, and I think they started, 6-0, 7-0, something like that, they had a good start. And people are talking about, oh, wow, the Warriors, are they back? Blah, blah, blah. I thought he was amazing through that first stretch of the season. And as good as he's been defensively, he's kind of brought a little bit of threat, at least as a 3-point shooter offensively at times. And regardless of the points he is scoring, what Draymond does so well is he's such a playmaker for this team as a passer, as a guy that runs the offense. And then you kind of pivot it over to the defensive side. And this isn't like a slight on Evan Mobley, who's been amazing and very deserving. And there's probably podcasts out there right now talking about Draymond's crazy. It's Evan Mobley's award to lose. Dyson Daniels, you're on a team that's 3 games under 500 in the East, great player on the rise. The Warriors, suddenly flip this switch and they're in the mix of it. And I think that helps in terms of this award winning. But you talk about stats, I think, in terms of blocks and steals, I think he might be the NBA leader in the month of March so far, where they've played several games. So that kind of swings in his favor. You talk about last night, what do you have? 4 blocks in 5 minutes, I think, to start the game. And when Draymond Green's at his best, he is that heart and soul. He's that heartbeat. He's that passion out there. He's a kid on a playground. I feel like he's a player, a lot of guys out there want to be, right? Like I'm a mini Draymond Green. You've heard that when you've been on the pickup floor before, because guys who just do everything. Well, he's really done that this year. I think he's been kind of the best image of whatever you think Draymond Green is at his peak. And I think you boil it down to last night's performance against Giannis, who, outside of Jokic, even, probably a little more scary than a guy like SGA is Giannis. And when they were locked up against each other, I think NBC Sports posted this graphic last night where they talked about, I think he was 0 for 6 when Draymond guarded him over a 7-minute.
I've seen that.
They checked in together at the end of the game with 4 minutes left, and that game did get tight late. And Giannis, outside of getting fouled a couple times, was held scoreless from the field. I think he had 1 shot that was a miss, and it wasn't necessarily close. And you kind of saw, as vocal as a guy, we saw him guard Cat the other night, and it was very, very vocal. And Draymond, kind of as good of a game as Cat had, Draymond really seemed to bother him as well. And we're obviously talking about 2 different players, but a guy like Giannis seemed to be very appreciative of Draymond's performance in that game. They were dapping each other up, seemed to be chatting for a second. I understand that's kind of common in the NBA, but it just seems like players around the league are kind of taking note that this dude is back in a way of as far as the Warriors go, Draymond's going to go. And it's interesting because we've seen a very tame Jimmy Butler so far, and we've seen him at his times, and we know what playoff Jimmy means. It's going to be interesting when those two kind of really get going, fiery wise in a playoff matchup, because I think them two defensively might just wreak havoc, cause some hell for kind of whoever they're lining up against, because we still haven't, as good as Jimmy Butler's been, haven't seen what playoff Jimmy means. And
that's another level. Yeah.
He talked last night that what the performance we saw against the Bucks was as close as playoff Jimmy. That's what that's going to look like. But even on the defensive side of the floor, their communication, they seem to really understand each other. And it's just, it's going to be really, really fun to watch. And as kind of a guy that's defended Draymond a lot over the years, it's nice to really see him take this step. And also, what does the Draymond Green effect? This guy who talks a lot as on the podcast, is a very vocal player on the court. What what does that do to voters? Do you think that makes an impact? I mean, I personally don't know. I mean, I've covered this team and this team only over the last couple of years. So it's hard for me to maybe see, but I mean, because
You would
I
hope not, right? Like all this stuff with like the cat, Karl Anthony Towns and like the little kind of back and
yeah,
forth. Like,
that was a tough one.
I've it was a tough look, and I praise Draymond for his play on the court, but I also criticize him where it's due. Whether it's a situation like this, whether it's a suspension here or there, the different things he's done over the years, and it's justified, right? Because Draymond brings it upon himself. But when you talk about the game itself, things like that shouldn't factor into voting. But we don't know how these voters vote, right? We don't know what kind of narratives they have going on in their mind. We don't know what kind of personal vendettas they have against players. And unfortunately,
which plays a role in this.
There is a human element to that, right? Then we just never know why they vote a certain way that they do. Like that one person that maybe didn't vote for LeBron that year he won MVP. There was I think he won got 99 out of the 100 votes or whatever it was. But one guy was like, "Nah, F that, I'm not voting for LeBron." So by the way, my dad said Draymond is a great defender, but Dennis Rodman was the best and baddest defender ever.
Pops knows ball.
Yeah,
I think it's weird. Like it's interesting for just I grew up in the Bay Area. I grew up a Golden State Warrior fan. Lucky enough to be around this team and get to write about them from time to time. But at the end of the day, I'm still a fan. And I think for my generation, getting to watch a guy like Steph play, I've kind of made this argument a handful of times where it's like Steph Curry is the greatest player I've put my eyeballs on. Kobe was amazing, obviously, but I grew up a Warrior fan. I grew up Kobe was the villain, and that's no disrespect for him. Now as an adult, I love the villains in sports. Like the guys I hated as a child, that's one of the reasons I love sports, because you need somebody to hate. Kobe was that for me. So I never was like, he's the greatest ever. I spent time trying to tear him down.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't watch Michael Jordan play. I had just heard stories from my dad. And then I've got to watch Steph closely, and you get to see it, man, this guy, one of the greatest players I've ever got to watch. Well, now you can kind of see, defensively, man, I just don't know if I'll ever get to watch a guy like Draymond Green. What he does all over the court, affecting positions 1 through 5. And I think we talk a lot about that, right? Like what we want out of a player. They can guard 1 through 5. That's like a common phrase now again. But what I think Draymond does is he can blow up what you're trying to do at 1 and 2 while still impacting 3, 4, and 5, all in kind of the same set, which is just a little bit different than I think how guys can blow games up here and there, where it's not like he just erases the guard that he's trying to guard on a switch, but he's also going to kind of impact the guy that's the big that's rolling to the basket, which is just something that is just a little bit of a different element. And like Dyson Daniels is a great player. Like he can do a little bit of that, right? Like he can guard the 1 through 5 for his size. And that's why he's doing this. And he gets a million steals and he blows up the passing lane. And you're like, wow, this guy's in the DPOY conversation. Well, it's like, for Draymond to be doing that at 35 years old and his size, which is still undersized for the position that he plays, I think is just like, you got to respect it. And you'd hope the voters out there would too. We'll see when award season rolls around. But at the end of the day, as long as the Warriors and Jimmy Butler and Draymond Green are kind of in the mix playoff wise, I don't think it's going to be that big of an impact. But it also will just be, as a person that always finds Draymond Green entertaining, it will be pretty funny to hear what he has to say if he does not win the award.
I think if it goes to a guy like Evan Mobley, I feel like Draymond, I don't think Draymond would say anything controversial because, you could definitely make the case.
Great player.
Great player. He's on a team that's number 1 in the East. I think they have the best record, maybe in all the NBA right now. And, if Dyson Daniels won it, that's different because, like you said, they're a few games under 500. Their team sucks. So it's like maybe something like that would piss Draymond off, right? But Mobley, I think definitely there's a valid case. And if Draymond ends up winning it, I think no one can really argue against it, right? And Draymond draws a lot of attention when he says something, whether it's on his podcast or he's on TNT or whatever, right? Because Draymond's a very outspoken guy.
Yeah.
He has a lot of haters on social media. People, the triple single, the backpack, the this and that. But if you really watch basketball, if you understand basketball, you know that Draymond is, like I said, a one-of-one player. He's a future Hall of Famer, one of the greatest defensive guys that we've seen in this league. And we talk about guys playing the way that they do at this age, whether it's Steph or LeBron or KD or James Harden, whoever it is. Draymond having the impact that he does on defense at this age is, pretty cool to see too. Because guys get older, their bodies start to break down, but Draymond's been doing a really good job this season, kind of bouncing back. And even though I'm a Laker fan, Draymond's always been one of my favorite players, to watch. And I play pickup ball. I'm not like I'm not the best scorer, I'm not the best shooter, but people have told me, oh, you kind of play like Draymond.
Let's go.
I take that as a compliment because
absolutely.
Draymond's a dog on the court. I take pride in playing defense, and I look at a guy like him, and he's definitely fun to watch. And there's not many guys that are built like that, But let's talk about the playoff picture a little bit now in the West too, because things are extremely, extremely tight in the West. Outside of the Thunder, who are up there at 1, seeds 2 through I think almost 8 are only separated by maybe 3 to 4 games. And right now, Warriors obviously the 6th seed, right? With that win yesterday, they're a half game up over the T-Wolves. But as things kind of continue to play out, as a Warriors fan and someone who covers the Warriors, do you think there are certain teams you would like to see them maybe avoid in the first round, and maybe certain teams that would also be a better matchup for them early on?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting because, up until, what is it, 18 games ago now, it was like, can they make the play-in type of thing? And then you're going to have to deal with SGA potentially in the first round, which felt like a very realistic possibility. And I think it would be fun to have seen that because it is like the veteran Steph Curry led Warriors against kind of the team on the rise next. And we've seen that before. And sometimes it can turn ugly for that team on the rise. Well, now you're kind of looking at this as like, are we in the mix as a team that's going to make it, a long run? I think Denver, I understand they took out the Warriors really shorthanded the other day. They kind of do a lot of things that could potentially bother the Warriors. They have owned them. I think they've won 8 straight regular season games against them. So Denver's always going to be, I think, at the top of my list personally. And then you look at a team they'd want to play. I mean, just out of pure fandom, it'd be awesome to play the Lakers at any point, right? Sandeep. I mean, the Warriors, Lakers, I feel like the NBA fans out there need LeBron
the league
versus
needs that.
Steph. Yeah, one time. I mean, that would be amazing to watch. But I think also Warriors fans out there, you look at a team like Houston that is playing really great basketball and has a lot of teams, a lot of players that are really good and on the rise and do a lot of things good. And there's a reason that they are sitting up there in the Western Conference.
I think the Dubs would smoke the Rockets.
But yeah, you look at Jimmy Butler and Draymond Green and Steph Curry, but even Jimmy Butler and Draymond Green, I mean, those two guys would take that series, I feel personally. The Warriors, similar to how the Nuggets have kind of reigned supreme over the Warriors really seem to have some ownership over the Houston Rockets over the years. There is just something about that. And I know the James Harden, the Chris Paul series, that was a long time ago. But to see them back in a playoff series against each other again would be intriguing because it would bring a little nostalgia back. And I think Draymond, Steph, Jimmy Butler would feel that as well. And that might swing in the favor of the Warriors. So if there's a team I'm looking at that might have a better record and might be kind of sitting up there higher, yeah, Houston would be a pretty fun matchup at some point in the playoffs, whether it's the first round or second. But Denver in the first round would be a little bit, I would be looking at that series. Yeah, and especially, you go to Denver for game 1 and they take that one, and you're kind of playing behind. It would be you really need to see this team dig deep. We need to see a lot from our guy Quentin Post, and with Draymond guard Jokic, the entirety of that series. I mean, it just kind of opens a lot of questions, and you're looking at a guy like Jonathan Kuminga who needs to play great because that is the model of a team that has athletic wings that can do a lot of different things that we don't talk about enough. Guys that really can make plays that aren't the stars. It's like Jonathan Kuminga has to kind of pair against those guys and match them. And it's something we haven't, seen work yet. So that would open a lot of questions for me. The confidence meter would dip a little bit there.
Yeah, I can agree with you there. I think the Nuggets as a Lakers fan is always the one team. I mean, they've knocked the Lakers out of the playoffs, I think 2 out of the last 3 years or something. Team that's presented problems for various reasons. And it all starts with Jokic right there in the middle. Although now things are a little different, we've seen with the Lakers, at least because of Luka Doncic now being on the team.
Yeah.
that first game, they matched up. The Lakers dominated. I was even surprised. I wasn't expecting a 20-point win in Denver against a team that's owned us, over the last handful of years. But, Luka Doncic presents way different problems than a guy like Anthony Davis did, right? Because of his playmaking ability, shot making ability. But I think what the Warriors have an advantage too there is Draymond is a guy that is a great one-on-one defender. And with Jokic, I think you want to try to make him beat you one-on-one. You don't want to start doubling him.
Point. Yeah.
You don't want him getting guys involved like a Murray or an MPJ or an Aaron Gordon, because then it gets everyone going, right? He likes drawing the double teams, right? But it's funny I say that because that's also how the Lakers were able to be so successful against him in that game, is they kept doubling him, and they did it at the right times with sending multiple guys. Sometimes you see 2 guys, 3 guys, and they prove there is a way to be effective against Jokic. And we know Steve Kerr is a very good coach, experienced guy. It would be a hell of a series for sure. Those teams did match up, and as a Laker fan, a Lakers Warriors series would be great. I hope we get it in either the second round or the conference finals if both teams were to make it that far. I don't think you want to see either of those teams get knocked out in the first round. So
no, I'm rooting for that. I'm rooting for that right alongside you. I really am. That would be fun to watch. It really would bring there's so many storylines. I mean, especially coming off the Paris Olympics run where Steph and LeBron seem super tight, and just kind of what that represented in this era of basketball as a whole, and to kind of seemingly put a bow on it with a series like that would be very fun to watch.
Yeah, it'd be incredible, man, for sure. I think the LeBron, Steph, and you talk about the 2 teams that made the biggest acquisitions, right? At the trade deadline too, absolutely, with Luka and Jimmy now in the mix. We know the Battle of the Bay in LA. Just so many storylines. That'd be great. But like I said, I'm hoping that comes second round to conference finals, between them. But it'll be interesting to see how things shake up here in the Western Conference. It's going to come down to definitely the last game of the season, I think, when it comes to the seeding, in the Western Conference. But
absolutely.
Let's shift gears here a little bit now, man. Let's talk some football, because as much as it is 49ers season, or I got to drop this comment in from one of my friends too. She said, "Jimmy buckets, chicken nuggets, Lakers in 5."
That's a good one. I'm not gonna lie, I love like the LeBron and the Shannon Sharp like TikToks always are popping up on my feed or any type of social media, and all the different like things people are adding to it. The creativity, it's hilarious. It's like an auto watch every single time.
Yeah, those have been really good. I dropped a comment on an Instagram post, I think a couple of days ago. I think I wrote, Austin Reeves, Keanu Reeves, Den of Thieves, don't matter. Lakers in 5.
It's hilarious, man. I mean, that's seriously so funny. And like then like the LeBron montage of him just dunking on everyone after. Like, I'm not a Laker fan, but that still gets me pumped up.
Yeah, the NBA memes are so funny.
Yeah.
All right, man. But yeah, let's talk a little bit of football now. Because like I said, 49ers, every offseason they're in the news. They're, whether it's Nick
not always seemingly for the best reason,
a Debo contract, a Brandon Ayuk contract, but now this offseason has been different, right? A huge overhaul of this roster. We've seen them let go of a ton of guys: Talanoa Hufanga, Dre Greenlaw, Aaron Banks, Kyle Juszczyk momentarily was let go, and then he was brought back. They traded JP Mason away to the Vikings, so a lot of overhaul. And I don't know about you, but I was sort of expecting this. I did expect a lot of guys to not be back. I knew there's going to be a huge offseason for this front office, right? This is the most important offseason, I think, for the 49ers in this regime under Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch, because they've been to a couple Super Bowls. They've been to a handful of NFC championships, obviously have come up short, haven't been able to get over the hump yet. And then last year, a 6-11 injury-plagued season in which they spent a lot of money, and it just didn't result in wins. It didn't result in even making it to the playoffs. And so something had to change, right? So what's been your kind of assessment of just how the Niners have approached this offseason, kind of the guys have let go of, and kind of just what their approach is now as they shift into this next kind of era of 49er football?
Yeah, I mean, I think your take on it is the correct one. They needed to get it out from some of this money to kind of have a chance. And you look around the league, like there wasn't some stark free agent out there that's going to drastically improve this team. this team has holes where they hurt, and that's on the offensive line, the defensive line. You can make a case for the secondary that is going to take some time. You're going to need some guys to develop. There's a lot of pressure on this rookie class from last season that played really well. I think Dre Greenlaw hurts because not only is he, a fun player that is easy to root for, but when he came back from this injury recently, he looked really good when he was out there. And so, that's something you worry about. Obviously, how does he respond from the injury? Well, he answered questions pretty quickly and looked great. With the arrivals of guys like Malik Mustafa and Renardo Green, you can make the case that they were prepared for that, for the exits of Fufanga and Javarius Ward, who've been impact players for them at times. But outside of, the Dre Greenlaw, I think losing Jordan Mason hurts a bit, because if you talk about like the storylines from last year that were positive ones, I think he was a part of
Definitely
that.
one
And,
of them.
and on top of that, Sandeep, like a fun guy to root for, right? Like a guy that runs hard, breaks tackles, kind of came out of nowhere. Like, this guy is fun. And then you look at like what that 49ers running back room looks like. You envision him kind of behind Christian McCaffrey as this power back, and you go, oh, that makes sense. That's a really nice 1-2 punch. So to lose that and not kind of be willing to pay him as a restricted free agent, I mean, that hurts, but obviously Isaac Arendo's made some headway, looked good at times last year. And then you look at this running back class, and it's really stacked, and Kyle Shanahan's kind of specialized in terms of drafting running backs. It was kind of made a case for that earlier with a piece I wrote about just like, don't be surprised if this team takes a running back again. And that was before the Jordan Mason trade. Now it seems
who's the back out of ASU that they've been connected to?
Cam Scatabo.
Yeah.
I actually wrote about him. Like, Sandeep, like, I understand, like, kind of thick cut white dude, wears a big number, like made a lot of plays, but I mean, very dynamic back, like can catch the football. The way he kind of bounces off tackles, like contact balance is a real thing when it comes to some of these guys. I mean, maybe has some of the best of that skill, whatever you want to call it, in this draft class, and then does have a little bit of speed that can break away from time to time. And he also seems to kind of fit what Kyle Shanahan maybe wants to do. So I think that, in that zone run scheme, I think he kind of fits. So I think, that's a very interesting name that we're going to be watching here in April's draft coming up. But
the Niners love them some exciting whites.
I think he'd fit. He'd fit this team or culture or whatever you want to say. But I mean, to make things work, under the assumption you're going to pay Brock Purdy a ton of money, which I think he deserves.
I agree.
You have to get out. You have to get out from some of this money, and it was never going to be pretty, right? Like when the Warriors kind of had a mass exodus after some of these injuries, and you're paying guys like Klay Thompson and Draymond Green and Steph Curry to stay around, they couldn't sign a bunch of dudes in free agency, no matter how many people wanted them to, because of the money. We're almost seeing a little bit of like that with the 49ers, but what makes it worse is they didn't win 4 championships. Right?
Yeah.
Like, and they got very close though to winning multiple of them. And so it feels easy to look at that team and to look at the stars, and the amount of players that you'd want to on that roster that you want to go buy their jersey, which, like, in my opinion, kind of equates some level of stardom. The 49ers might have the biggest category, on fanatics when it comes to these type of guys. And to not win one when you have a roster that's that decorated from top to bottom, it does hurt. But unfortunately, it seems like, they're going to have to go through it a little bit to get back up there. And would it surprise me at all if this team's in the playoff mix, wins a game, makes a run here with the guys they have on this roster? No. Would it also surprise me if they are fighting for a top pick again next year? No. We don't know. Like, they were not a good football team from week 2 on, essentially. That slip was just never switched. It did not work. And to run it back, something we've seen bad teams do time and time again, and just push off that time to blow it up, and then your franchise is torpedoed suddenly, and your coaches are getting fired and GM is getting fired. It feels like, the optimist speaking here, the 49ers got a little out ahead of that. You got a lot of draft picks. You hit on some big picks last year. You do have some youth that seems to be improving. What you do with guys like Brandon Ayuk and even some of the veterans on this team, I don't know. Those are big question marks that John Lynch and Parag Marathe and Kyle Shanahan are going to have to figure out here. But it just wasn't working. They were not a good football team, and they had injuries for sure that made an impact on that. But from top to bottom, I mean, there was a reason they were 6-11. There was a reason they were knocked out of the playoffs with 2 weeks left to go in the year. They weren't good. And so the fact that they're getting out in front of it now, it seems like, again, in my opinion, I mean, that's probably the right way to handle business.
Yeah, it's a shame. When you look back at this team over the past 5-6 years, it's going to always be it's always going to hurt 49er fans that this core couldn't get it done because they were so talented, had so many great players on both sides of the ball, got close 2 times, right? When you think about the leads they had in both Super Bowls, and to not be able to just finish things off is gonna really hurt. And the front office, right? You mentioned Lynch and Parag. At some point, things are gonna have to change, and they already invested a lot of money into guys over the last handful of years, and they couldn't do it. And now, guess what? Some of these guys are 29, 30, 31, 32. We know Trent is, probably 1 year away from retirement. McCaffrey, though he's still, in his prime, coming off of, injuries that plagued him last season too. George Kittle, as much as we all love him, he's only getting older too. He's going to be 32 soon, right? And
had an incredible year. We're talking about positive storylines. That's a guy that it's like, for his performance on the field, let alone for what he does for the locker room, that, like, I would argue out of anyone probably deserves the money. Like, you kind of slide him in front of guys like the Brandon Ayuk's and Christian McCaffrey's and stuff. Like, he's absolutely deserving of any type of money that comes his way, because
what do you think that contract looks like for Kittle?
I think you got to throw him his way. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but I mean, I think whatever he is, kind of that market price is, whether that's, you're paying him as the second best tight end behind Travis Kelce, or even the best tight end in the NFL. I mean, he has absolutely proven that. I mean, the wins that they did have this past year, it seemed like he really willed a lot of it. And, I think he's also just, I'll always mention this because it's something that we could probably talk about for hours and it's still not get enough credit, is the reason Kyle Shanahan's run game has been so good in front of a guy like Christian McCaffrey is George Kittle's a monster as a blocker. You could just
blocking. I mean, he is the best tight end in the game. I don't think there should be any doubt about that.
And, Sandy, now it's so common for teams to spend money on 2 guys, one as a blocker and one as a pass catcher. And the 49ers are in the position where they don't have to do that with George Kittle, and he does both at such a high level. So,
but they also did do that because they did pay Luke Farrell, right? $11 million guaranteed. Yeah. And he's not known to be a pass catching guy, right? For sure. He's known as a blocker.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I think they've tried to find one of those guys over the last couple of years. You think of that tight end room, and you drafted 2 guys in the same year and they both didn't work. They've really kind of swung and missed as kind of finding a number 2 to him, where you go out and you spend a little money, and if that's a position you want to address because it potentially helps out the offensive line, which has struggled, and you stick him next to Colton McKivitz, and
they tried to get what's a guy's name, Brock Wright from the Lions. Remember, they offered him the offer sheet, and then the Lions matched it.
Yeah, who had didn't he have a touchdown in the playoffs recently too for them in that game they lost? I don't know.
Yeah. But it makes sense. I think, Kittle, he is due for an extension. I'm expecting him to get one. Also I think Fred Warner's, in that category too of guys who just, carried both sides of their respective sides of the ball. Kittle, like I said, 31, turning 32 soon. We know him being a leader, the locker room guy, has been with this team from the start. And I guarantee if you were to ask him, he'd want to retire a 49er. And this next contract he gets will probably be the last big one. And then anything after that will probably end up being, less than what he gets now. But I can see him getting something in the ballpark of, it's going to be like 3 years, maybe 4 years. And the AAV is probably going to be, I think, somewhere between 12 to no more than 15 million a season.
Yeah. I mean, whatever that market value is, I mean, I think those guys are about as deserving as it is. And you look around that locker room, and a lot of contracts have been handed out there. And I think the 2 guys that are most deserving of it can easily kind of look and say, like, we deserve this each. And I don't think they're also going to play that kind of holdout game either. It seems like the type of guys they are. I wanted to mention one of the comments here from our boy Amon here. I think he said they will hit on the draft. That's just a question. That's like something heading into this offseason where you have the 11th pick in the draft, which is incredibly valuable. And the 49ers have not drafted that high in a long time because they haven't had to. They've traded picks. Then you have an abundance of picks on day 2 and day 3 where that has turned incredibly valuable as well. Sandeep, I don't know. Like I pay a lot of attention to the draft. I write 2 draft stories a week, it seems like. And it seems like the kind of overall expectation of the 49ers changes from week to week of like who and what they will draft.
They're connected to so many different players in different positions.
So many different players in so many different positions, which is probably a good thing, right? We don't know what they're going to do. But for them to be competitive next season, I think this is where the question part of it comes, because we just listed out all these guys that are veterans and have been in the game. I think the expectation when you're the San Francisco 49ers and you roll out the team you're going to roll out with the money that you're paying these guys, like the expectation is playoffs. It's not like, hey, we're going to rebuild it type of thing with the guys we have in-house. Like the expectation is to get there.
Yeah.
I don't know what position like you draft that's going to go and like instantly make them a playoff caliber team type of thing. Like you can make the case for offensive line. I mean, that's probably where I would go, but you could also make the case for defensive tackle. Well, defensive tackle specifically, like you find your best defensive tackles probably in day 2 and day 3. So like, I wouldn't love a defensive tackle at 11. I think ideally you'd probably want to draft a good one in rounds 3, 4, 5, because that's where this draft class is deep at that position specifically. And in league history, you can hit on defensive tackles during those rounds, but does a round 3 like defensive tackle as a guy that's maybe going to be in the mix as a starter, at least in that defensive tackle rotation, like that doesn't, I don't tell you that and you go playoffs, right? Like that doesn't kind of hit the switch. And like, I don't think, you're going to go the 2 best playmakers, in my opinion, that are up there at the top. I love Ashton Genty's game. You're not probably going to draft him. That would be a shocker. Tyler Warren, Penn State tight end, monster. I think whoever hits on him is going to be, you're going to have your George Kittle. You're going to have a guy like that. I kind of made the case for the 49ers, if they are going to draft a playmaker, to go after him. And you have 2 just absolute chess pieces on the team. That makes me interested, but I don't think it's necessarily a position of need. And I just wrote about,
especially after they signed Luke Farrell,
Yeah. And it's like, I recently wrote about a corner.
Who are some of the guys that you've seen, that you've been writing about, that you've seen the Niners kind of connected to? Also just guys you personally think the Niners should be kind of targeting, because I've seen D tackle, I've seen O-line, I've seen that corner from Michigan. There's like a lot of different guys. There's the edge from A&M, I think, that they've been tied to. So who are some of the guys in your mind?
Michael Williams is a guy that gets thrown around a lot. I think he was recently mocked to them in maybe Mel Kiper's most recent mock. He's incredibly athletic, like that physical product that comes out of Georgia that we've seen across the NFL as a whole. I'm not like in love with his game. The edge class as a whole is maybe not as star packed as we are used to seeing. And we see Georgia listed alongside an edge rusher and you go like, this is going to be a dude, which he very might well be, but not necessarily in love with him. The defensive ends as a whole, not necessarily like going to be banging the table for. I think there is some value with the offensive line there. Like you have a kid out of Mizzou who's a stud. You got Tyler Booker who's a guard out of Bama, and this team really needs several pieces on the offensive line. You need a guy
100%.
that can kind of play multiple positions. I think Will Campbell out of LSU, I recently wrote about him because he was mocked, but I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if he goes in the top 5 and been a star left tackle for the LSU Tigers for the last couple of years. Some analysts have predicted him to move inside to the guard position, and he's really fast and his technique is like flawless. That's what probably his best skill set is. And it seems to fit what Kyle Shanahan wants to do, because what he asks of his offensive linemen is a little bit more than what another team would ask of their offensive linemen because of all what they do in that run game. So he seems like a fit, but that seems like a home run situation for them, because again, I don't necessarily think that he's going to be there for them. And then that secondary unit, you mentioned Will Johnson, the corner out of Michigan, who I think is an absolute star. Again,
Yeah.
would probably be a home run type of guy. He was injured. He's been injured all he played like 3 or 4 games. During those 3 or 4 games, I think he had like 2 pick sixes. Was a monster during the Michigan title run. I mean, he absolutely Mike Sanistril, who's been making a ton of plays for the Washington Commanders over this past season. He was the corner opposite to him during their Michigan's playoff run against Washington and Alabama, and they made just a million plays during that series, both of them as corners. And Will Johnson was always like projected to be the better guy. And if you're going to be better than Mike Sanistril, who's already making plays as a rookie, like this is a guy that's going to make an impact right away. But I don't know, Sandeep, like is secondary the position, like is corner the position that like makes that impact that pushes this team into like playoff consideration? I don't really know, because I mean, I love what Renardo Green brought to the table. I mean, I think he's a really, like, you have a piece there. And then Gianmarco Lenoir is a stud, you know, and that's the reason why you let some of these corners go. And so just adding kind of a third guy to that rotation bump this team up a category. I don't know. I think it's a really good question. And what they're going to do there is about as intriguing as it is any team that's not necessarily like in the quarterback mix, right? Because everybody wants to talk about those teams right now. Well, the 49ers, like they're a team that's knocking on the door of the playoffs as they are right now. And then you add in this, kind of a blue chip prospect at 11 that you're potentially going to get a better guy than you would, because so hopefully some of those quarterbacks go off the board early and it knocks some of these better prospects down to 11, where you're realistically drafting, a top 8 type of guy on the board, because the quarterbacks go off the board early. So you might get lucky there, but I don't know. And I think who they draft there is kind of going to tell a little bit of the story, because last year, if you think about this, no one, and I loved Ricky Pearsall. He was one of my draft crushes. I tweeted about him. I wrote a couple stories about him.
Mm-hmm.
I was about as big a fan as it gets. I did not think he was going in the first round to the 49ers of all teams, but that told us a lot about what this management thinks of this team and the moves that were coming. And so we might get a little bit of the picture of what that's going to be with the San Francisco 49ers in April with who they take in the first round, because we'll find out really quick.
Yeah, I think what you said is a great point, right? Just kind of lets us know how the Niners are kind of approaching this draft, and that's to say that they're unpredictable, right? Because I didn't think we were going receiver with the first round last year. I was expecting corner or safety. They were connected to guys like Cooper DeJean and among a few others, and all of a sudden you hear Ricky Pearsall's name called at wide receiver. And I wasn't mad about the pick. I mean, I've seen the tape on Ricky, really athletic guy, great route runner, all that stuff. And I think he's going to have a great sophomore season, but I think what that tells us is, at number 11, the Niners could really go in any direction here. And I think a big part of that's going to be also just who's available, right? They might, I guarantee you they have at least 5 to 7 different guys that they're targeting at number 11, because it's really going to just depend on who's available. Maybe there's a guy that drops that they didn't expect to be there at 11, like a Will Johnson, or, maybe one of these defensive linemen. I don't think Mason Graham's going to slip to number 11.
Yeah, I would
not
be
at
surprised.
all. But I've seen him most mock drafts. I've seen him. He's going in the top 5, top 6. This one I'm looking at on CBS Sports has him going 9 to the Saints. So it kind of just really depends on who's going to be there. But the case in point for the Niners is definitely they do have a few areas of need, and edge is one of them. Defensive tackle is one of them. Corner is one of them.
All 5 positions on the
offensive line. They're gonna need a replacement at left tackle, right? Because Trent Williams only has 1 more season left. Probably Dominic Pooney was the guy they really did well on last year, right? Yeah. So, but they do have to really, really bolster up that offensive line. And out of the 11 picks they have, wouldn't be surprised if at least like 3, maybe 4 of those are positions on the O-line, because Purdy's about to get paid a big chunk of change, and you want to have an offensive line that
you want to protect that investment,
but also develop and grow with Purdy. Guys that are young and will be around this organization for the next handful of years to come. I want to ask you one more question on the 49ers before we talk a little March Madness. When you look at Brock Purdy, who would you rank ahead of him in terms of quarterbacks? We know about obviously guys like Mahomes, Lamar, Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, right? I think that's when Bonte was on the show a couple weeks ago. He called them the Golden Four. The top, those are the top four guys in the league.
Yeah.
After that, who are guys that you would put ahead of Purdy, and where do you kind of think he ranks in terms of the NFL's best quarterbacks?
I mean, it's a tough question, and a question that as a fan of the Miami Dolphins, that's the team that I grew up rooting for. I always seem to kind of dread, because where do you put
Tua compared to him?
Where do you put Tua on that list? And probably slide Brock in front of him is at least where we start, right? And then, Jared Goff was amazing this year. He's probably in that conversation, right? I mean, he's up in there. And you look around this league, and it's interesting because we probably could reshuffle that group. A healthy Dak Prescott, where does he land? He's probably under both of those guys. I would say probably you slide him behind Tua and Brock Purdy. I understand people out there can make their arguments. That's just my personal opinion.
I would have a healthy Dak ahead of Brock Purdy.
You'd have a healthy Dak outside of. I'm actually looking up because I want to see some of these.
I think I think about, it's crazy, right? Because that top four, like I said, is the top four. But then the question I always ask myself is, who's number 5? I feel like there isn't a clear-cut guy.
I mean, it's interesting because to me, like, Justin Herbert is probably the guy you could easily point to because of the skills. We necessarily haven't seen that equate to wins as a whole. But, I mean, obviously there's a reason that everybody mentions Justin Herbert as the next guy on that list. Where does Jaden Daniels rank, Sandy? I mean, is he probably 6? I mean, you could put him as high as 6, I think, easily.
You think he's up there already?
I mean, I do. I mean, down the second half of the season, the kid was amazing. I mean,
he was great. And I think you can definitely say he's ahead of Brock Purdy, especially because considering what he did to this franchise within one season, right? As the guy. CJ Stroud is a guy I'd have ahead of Purdy for sure.
For sure.
I think
Jalen Hurts.
Hurts, I already, even entering last season, I had Hurts, I think, like one spot ahead of Purdy. And after seeing what he did this year and how he played in the Super Bowl, I think it's definitely, valid. Although at the same time, I was actually arguing with somebody who comments on one of my YouTube posts about this. I think while Jalen Hurts you can rank him ahead of Purdy, I don't think there's a lot of things that separate him from Brock Purdy when you look at the talent. I think Jalen Hurts has a stronger arm, a better deep ball. He's a really better runner, but Purdy's also a good runner.
Yeah.
The numbers aren't anything crazy when you look at Jalen Hurts in terms of what he does popping out. I know he has like 12 rushing touchdowns, but that's courtesy of the tush push, right? I don't think there's, when you look at just playing the quarterback position, there's many things that Hurts does to really just catapult him way ahead of Purdy. But because he's been doing it for a handful of years now, and he has now become a Super Bowl winning quarterback too, I think there's no case there that he is better than Purdy. But Herbert, to me, really strong arm, talented guy, but like you said, it hasn't equated to wins yet. And he did struggle last year in that playoff game too, throwing 3 interceptions, I think, in that game, which is not a good look on him against the Texans. And so even a guy like him, I think I feel like there's a lot of guys that are just in this category where they're kind of right around the same line, but I would have Dak ahead of him. I would have CJ Stroud. I think it's fair to put Jaden Daniels. I think Aaron Rodgers is still really good too.
Kyler Murray.
Kyler Murray, I don't think so. Yeah. I don't know. Mobile guy, but just still hasn't really done anything yet in this league too,
For sure. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because all those guys, I think you talk to 10 different people, and they probably have 10 different lists across the board. I mean, granted of who you're a fan of, because it's like,
Tua's one I think about too. I'm like, Tua has one of the fastest releases, I think if not the fastest releases of all the quarterbacks. Throws for like 4,000 yards a season when he's healthy. Not a mobile quarterback, obviously. Hasn't equated to postseason success yet either. So it's like, where do you put him? Baker Mayfield, where would you put him?
Yeah, that's great. I mean, he probably deserves a spot over both of these guys we're talking about, probably easily, right? With how he looked last year and how he, it's funny, like Brock and you could throw Tua in this bunch probably as well, as like they are not expected, even though they should, to elevate their teams, right? A lot of the guys we mentioned elevate their teams. Like they make their teams significantly better. And when things look bleak, they make the best of these situations and turn losses into wins. And it's like we haven't necessarily seen a ton of that from Brock Purdy and Tua as a whole, obviously. But like Baker Mayfield has done that for the Bucs for the last 2 seasons, you know, and there's been times where they have looked awful and suddenly you look up and it's the 4th quarter and Baker Mayfield's leading them down the field for a game-winning touchdown. And it's like guys that possess that type of skill are like guys you want under center on your team. We got to kind of, I think you brought it up perfectly, just like throw him some respect in this conversation of where Baker lies on this, you know, wholeheartedly. Like he deserves a spot up there. And, you know, I kind of mentioned him off the jump, but like Jared Goff too, in a way. Like he has done some things where he's been bad at times, don't get me wrong, but like since he has been with the Lions, it just seems like such a perfect fit with him and Dan Campbell and the things that they have done. And like, I don't know, Sandeep, like we're having this conversation a couple years ago. Like I've completely written off Jared Goff and I've completely written off Baker Mayfield of all people. And now those guys look like legitimate quarterbacks in this league behind winning teams that make the playoffs, which just seems crazy.
Yeah, see, Goff is an interesting one to me too, because really, really, you know, strong arm, great deep ball, a veteran quarterback, right? Who's won a lot in his career. And he has helped turn this Lions team around over the last 2 seasons, but we've seen him struggle at times too. And when you do see him struggle, you immediately think, okay, that's the Jared Goff that we know, right? He has some really good games, and then he has these moments where he's telegraphing his passes, and it's an interception or 2 or 3 in a game, and ends up resulting in losses, and it hasn't equated to the postseason success yet either. And you know, pocket passer, right? One-dimensional guy who can't really step out of the pocket and make throws on the run, is not a playmaker with his feet, you know. So maybe a little bias here. I wouldn't put him ahead of a guy like Purdy, because at least Purdy is a mobile guy. You know, and for any quarterback, look, you need to have talent around you to be successful, unless you're one of these guys like, you know, Mahomes is, you know, he's had Tyreek Hill, he's had Travis Kelce, but we've seen since the departure of Tyreek Hill, even though Chiefs have still been able to win, and that's the most important thing, Mahomes' individual numbers aren't as great as they were when he had Tyreek lined up alongside of him, right, on the outside, when he's throwing for 40-plus touchdowns a season. The thing about Mahomes is he's a generational player.
For sure.
And like you said, he makes guys around
hard
him
to
better.
hard to hold guys like him to like the same standards we're holding Brock Purdy to, just because of that talent level is so.
But you look
so
at Jalen Hurts. He has AJ Brown. He has Devontae Smith. He has Dallas Goedert. Last year he had Saquon. Right. I looked up his stats. You know, before he had that core guy of receivers, his numbers weren't anything crazy. And even since then, he's only been throwing, I think, like 22 or 23 touchdowns. So, you know, my point in saying that is not to knock Jalen Hurts. It's just that every quarterback, better players you have around you, the better you're going to be. You know, Joe Burrow is my favorite quarterback in the league. He has Jamar Chase. He has T. Higgins, right? Justin Herbert hasn't had quality receivers like that yet up until maybe this last season. I mean, Keenan Allen was really good, right? But it was only Keenan. This past season, it was pretty much just Ladd McConkey, and then you've had some other guys kind of just filling in here.
Yeah.
You know,
I'm surprised that they're like inactivity in the wide receiver market, but yeah, it's interesting. You know, we'll see. Hopefully this next season kind of tells a lot, and Brock Purdy at least has lined himself up for a payday, like a lot of the guys we had just mentioned. I think that's a question that's kind of easy to answer. Yeah,
it'll be interesting to see how much Brock gets paid, and whether it's a 2-year, 3-year deal or a full 5-year deal, and what the AAV is, you know, but it'll be interesting to see when that happens. All right, man, I'm gonna let you get out of here, but real quick, March Madness getting started.
Oh,
I want to hear
what I've been waiting for, what I've been excited about.
Yeah, it's that time of the year, man. You know, I haven't kept up with college hoops as much this season as I have in years past. But watching these conference tournaments in the past week has got me excited. You know, already a lot of buzzer beaters, games that have been coming down to the wire. Obviously, the controversy around UNC, whether they should get into the tournament or not. And they smacked San Diego State yesterday. I feel like that was a big statement game for them. And I feel like they have a bit of a chip on their shoulder now because of all this talk that's been going around. So, just what teams are you looking at? Who are some of the top 4 to 5 teams that could make a run?
Yeah.
Upset potentials in any of these brackets, and kind of just where you stand from all
I think
perspectives right now.
I think the west side of the bracket is just packed full of dogs. Starting with Florida and then leading to St. John's and Rick Pitino. St. John's is a team that, like, if you like toughness, if you like grittiness, they're the team for you. It wouldn't surprise me if they get ran in the second round by a team that they can't hit a three, because they're offensively, they struggle at times, but defensively they're about as mean as it gets, and they're attitude driven. So they're a really fun team to root for. Kadary Richmond, their point guard, does everything for them. He's kind of like a Rick Pitino on the floor for them, a tough player, really fun to watch. And then you look over at Florida, that's probably the most like complete team in basketball, led by stud guard that shoots three-pointer. They got 2 7-footers that bang. One of them bangs off the bench pretty tough. They got guys who just do everything. They're really, really deep as a whole. And they have, I believe his name is Elijah Martin. He's number 15 for Florida. About as entertaining as a player to watch, in my opinion, just does everything for them. Like, gets the tough rebound, hits a three to stop a run, gets a block, like kind of just like all the things that provide, like, equate to winning basketball. It seems like he does for them. So just a really entertaining player to watch, but they're going to have a tough road to get there. If I was a betting man, Florida would be a team that I would definitely love to sprinkle some money on. Duke, I know, is probably a team that many people are out there filling their bracket out to win. I mean, the ACC, Sandeep, you didn't watch a lot of it because it was
bad this year.
It was terrible. You didn't really miss anything. It was bad. So, like, who did Duke play? They beat Auburn early in the season. It was probably their best win of the year. You handled Louisville without Cooper Flagg, who's probably going to be the first pick in the draft. They have a ton of great players. Malawak, their center, blocks, rebounds, just does everything. Con Knipple, big-time three-point shooter. I have question marks because in the second round, you could potentially play Mississippi State, who's coached by Chris Jans, who's just an absolute monster coach. Defensive team, SEC, battle-tested, played all the teams, gave them a run probably at every time. I mean, the SEC had 14 schools in the tournament. Mississippi State was, right there in the mix at times. You might play them in the second round if they can get through. That's a really tough game. It's a really tough game. I think Duke probably still handles business, but it'll kind of give me like a breath of like what Duke's going to be, because if they just roll past Mississippi State, like, oh man, they might roll.
And they could go all the way.
Yeah, because they have a pretty easy walk there. I think Oregon is the 5 seed that they'd have to run into potentially in the Sweet 16 up there, which I don't think they're a very special team at all. Alabama's the 2 seed in their bracket, who've looked pretty bad over the last couple weeks, and they're just such an offensive hit or miss team. Mark Sears, a guy that I probably thought was going to be player of the year heading into the season, stud point guard, has kind of fallen off, been a little bit banged up. But again, it's going to be interesting. Like, one of the storylines that I'm going to be following is just like how the SEC overall kind of responds, because they've been, like you're talking about, this is the greatest conference of all time. Like, right. Like this year alone,
14 teams, right?
Yeah. If they all get bopped out of the tournament right away, then like, did they beat each other up, or were they just frauds the whole way? Like, or do they just kill everybody along the way? And it's Auburn, Florida, Kentucky, Tennessee, Alabama,
all SEC final
yeah. I mean, which is like as realistic as it gets. A team that I'm probably putting on my bracket a little farther than most is BYU. BYU is a really entertaining basketball team. Like, they're coached by Kevin Young, who has had all his experience. He was just recently coached with the Phoenix Suns. They have a huge NIL deal there. They have some players. They just got the #1 ranked prospect in all of basketball is going to be at BYU next year. Guy out of Napa, prolific prep. AJ Dybinsta.
Oh, he's a Napa guy.
Prolific prep guy. And so he, he's going to be out there at BYU balling. And then they have, Igor Dimin, who's going to be probably a 3 pick. He does a little bit of everything for them. Like, gets like 5 assists a game, 4 rebounds, about 10 or 11 points. really, really great player. But alongside of him, like he's the freshman, he's the youngster of the bunch. They have a lot of veteran guys that have been there for a long time. And Kentucky's head coach, Mark Pope, he coached them the last couple of years, and they ran a really like pro style efficient offense. And I'm a Kentucky fan. I'm wearing the shirt right now. I love what Mark Pope's done because it's been such a breath of fresh air in terms of like a basketball coach versus what Calipari was the last couple of years. And he got a lot of these players that do these things well, hit corner threes, shoot the ball a ton. It's like hit a corner three or it's a dunk or a layup. Very NBA style basketball, which like teams in college don't really run a lot. Like you're going to get a lot of back to the basket, a lot of dribble drive, where at the college level, if a team's just going to camp out at the 3-point line, and it's like, even if you're not a good 3-point shooter, we're going to shoot that shot because it's efficient, can kind of confuse defenses. So if BYU kind of gets rolling, it wouldn't surprise me if they're kind of in the mix for like an Elite Eight type of run there. And then I think the biggest mystery is that bottom corner of the bracket that has your Kentucky, your Tennessee, your Houston. Gonzaga is the 8 seed in that bracket, where it's like right now, as we're talking, all those teams could be eliminated by this weekend. Like that is how volatile that group of teams are. Also, it wouldn't surprise me if Houston or Kentucky or Tennessee won it all, or Gonzaga makes a run out of the 8th seed. Like that is how up and down that bracket is over there. And it's going to be fun. I mean, it's going to be really fun. It's my favorite time of the year. I got a plane ride to Vegas in the morning.
Oh, hell yeah.
Out there to watch some of the games with some buddies. We do a little annual trip out there. I'm obviously a big college hoops fan. Watch all year long. I think if I had a pick for tonight, I would have given you Xavier -3.5. And I think they're like down 8 at halftime. So we're already starting out hot, baby.
All right. I'm gonna let you get out of here. So just give me your final four, your championship matchup, and who wins it.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, I'm a big Kentucky fan, so this is going to be biased because I think my first bracket I filled out, I had Michigan State, Florida, Kentucky, and then Arizona, which I don't know how they made it there, because talk about volatility, that team is all over the place. And then I had Kentucky and Florida in your finals with Kentucky winning it. But I do think, take the bias away. I think Florida is probably the best team. Like if I were to pick a team outside of Kentucky to win it all, it would be Florida. And I think Michigan State's very, very good. And I've learned in my life to just not bet against Tom Izzo. And this team out of all teams is so representative of him in terms of like toughness. Like they're just like a team that's going to like, you can punch them and you're going to go down and they're going to go down 10, but they'll win that game by 10 themselves by just like, you hit me, we'll hit back harder type of thing. And so it wouldn't surprise me if you're going to see a Florida, Michigan State Final Four, potentially Michigan State handles Auburn in the Elite Eight. Like that, those two teams right there are very like whoever makes it out of that side could win it all.
Yeah. I did catch Florida a little bit during the SEC tournament, and they're good on both sides of the ball. Yeah. They dominated. It was they played Auburn right in the SEC final. And
they played Tennessee because Auburn lost
was
to Tennessee. Yeah,
that's right. That's right. Yeah, but I remember catching some of that game and just like seeing them up by 20 points. Just they coasting. Don't really do much wrong. A lot of good players. They get contributions from multiple guys. Right, it's not just one guy that carries a load. I think Florida's probably. I still have to fill out my bracket, I'm gonna do like at least 3 or 4 different brackets and pick different winners. But Florida's probably gonna be one of the teams I pick for sure. Yeah. I do think Michigan has a chance to make a little bit of a run, maybe to
see. They got a tough round 1 game. They got like the sexy 12-5 that everybody's on with UC San Diego, which I think they play tomorrow, which will be kind of a fun. That's probably the game you're want to watch.
Yeah, and 5-12 is always one of those potential upset ones, right? So we know there's definitely a chance there. But I don't know, Michigan, being a Big Ten team, which was a good conference, right? Very well, absolutely, very battle tested. So
yeah, they got 2 7-footers. One guy can shoot it. Like they bang. Yeah,
they definitely do. All right, Tommy, I'm gonna let you get out of here, man. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining me today. And for those who tuned in or watching this later on on YouTube, give Tommy a follow on Twitter, Instagram. He works for USA Today, writes for the Warriors Wire and the Niners Wire. Very tapped in on the NFL, NBA, and college hoops, as you guys can tell. Keep up with him for NFL draft coverage too, as it relates to the 49ers, and just all around good guy too. Tommy, thank you so much for joining
Man,
me.
I didn't get the Hooper mention in there out of all the stuff we talked, Sandeep. I was just
We still got a hoop, bro.
I was hoping I'd get the
hoop.
hoop. I was hoping I'd get the Hooper mention. If you were ever on my podcast, I just throw you that lob, just see the people going out there. No, I appreciate you guys. I appreciate it. Yeah, I actually do. We have a little run in Marin on Saturdays that I was going to with a buddy, and then I don't know if you ever worked with David Tedla at NBC, but him and I would play in the morning, sometimes 6 a.m. run. This is your old man before work type of thing. But that can be hard with the kiddo and everything and work and all that stuff. But every once in a while, yeah, definitely get out there at least once a month, try to get out there.
Man, maybe I'm gonna have to. I mean, considering you got a kid, I think I'm gonna have to make my way out to your neck of the woods sometimes. And
yeah, would love that.
We'll have to get some running.
Yeah, absolutely, man. You're always welcome. And I appreciate everybody out there for listening, man. It was fun. I had a blast doing it. Been too long for sure. This just felt like it felt like sitting at the intern chairs, bro.
Oh, the good old days when we'd go at it.
Sir.
All right, man.
Thanks,
Thank you so much.
It.
We'll definitely have you back on the program at some time, and hopefully your Kentucky Wildcats can make a little bit of a run here.
Please, just win one. Give me some hope.
All right, Tom. Until next time.
Thank you, bro. Thank you.